Yeah, hey, how's it going, Burst? Thanks for joining me tonight.
Hey, you're welcome, man. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, of course, of course. Since this is your first time on, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what kind of was your burning bush moment that kind of spurred you to traverse on the path that you're on today?
Yeah, I'm one of the ones who was like born this way,
I get it.
Always on the periphery, this whole time since I was a kid, right? Always knew there was something weird going on, right? Maybe something fucked up, right?
Yeah.
And so, but as far as like in the current environment, like I was in school in Pasadena in 99 through 03. And I lived in LA, after that for a while. And I was going to Art Center, College of Design for Industrial Design. And so the designing process and a really intensive coursework at that school, 100 hours a week, just made me delve into like this problem of manufacturing, right? And so I come at it, that's where I began. I was like, how can we fix this? Because I really think that is one of the major places where we need to adjust, If there is anything to do, it was that. And I thought that really hard back, around 03. And so I started to work on this idea about like how we could fix it, And so that's basically it. It's coming from a perspective of that people exchange value with each other in order to survive. And mostly that exchange is around our capability for industry.
Mm-hmm.
Our means of production, the stuff we make is what we trade with each other,
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, it really is the core of our interaction, our relationship with each other. And so that's where I kind of began. And then, later, being a product designer, always wanting to design something that is going to make an impact, And that's the difficult part about being a designer, right? Is that you always want some big idea, to come from yourself, and, really working on that aspect about how it is I want to be of service, and not just making something that everyone loves, but actually transforming the whole thing, And so I had all this information, just building up. And so I decided to start a podcast about 3 years ago. And it's a kind of a book on tape, It's only 26 episodes at the moment. But it's real intense. And it's about, I began it as like, there's a solution, right? There's a way we can fix this, And as I explore, you can watch me go through the whole thing, and I amend and I edit and I update, my whole thing. But it's still, I told you I was radically optimistic, right? And so I still feel that in my bones,
You and me both, man. You and me both.
So yeah, that's basically it. I mean, there's more. I majored in physics first, actually, so I could talk about that. It's more like a spiritual reason for getting into physics,
I could totally understand that.
But also, like, synchronicities and stuff. I was always in on this. My parents were hippies growing up in New Mexico, so I had this vernacular inside. And so I was in astronomy fucking class, and we were looking at some images of some shit out in space. And I was like, man, I'm switching my major from paleoanthropology to physics tomorrow because I just saw something that reminded me of my 9th grade science project,
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And real quick, so one thing that you touched on, the one thing I want to talk about is you talked about how manufacturing and trade, and one thing that I really like about that is you're absolutely correct, because human to human relationships, whether a family oriented, whether acquaintance or business, even from a business perspective, are very important. And that human relationships alone are very important, especially when we talk about commerce or trade, when providing goods and things that we need, not just at a corporate level, but also on a fulfilling level. Where you're coming from. So what I want to ask you is, because you're definitely speaking my language here. Do you feel we honestly live in a world of abundance, and it's only marketed to us as being a world of scarcity? for whatever particular or ulterior motives.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And that's one of the main things I talk about is that we've been in this pattern, as a civilization for 9,000 plus, years. We could probably push it back, another 1,000, right?
Exactly. I called it the 8,000-year lie, but yeah, you're about right. You're about right.
And so what was the question again?
Oh, sorry, you're good, man. So do you feel that we truly live in a world of abundance?
Yeah.
And that it's only marketed as a world of scarcity to help kind of manipulate and perpetuate a certain narrative?
Absolutely. In fact, I even say, right, one of the main things I talk about in the thing is polarity. And I noticed you mentioned a non-dualistic mode of operation or non-dual, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's all about polarity, and as far as whether or not we're in an abundant universe, it's absolutely true, because when you think about it, people living, this is just an example, people living are adding to the pool of value constantly, right? And it does not diminish, it only increases. Right. So it's not a diminishing supply at all. As the more we live, the more value we create, the bigger the pool of value there is for everyone. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so you can't put a limit on that supply. You can't raise the price. Scarcity model is fucking supply and demand, right? Supply and demand is scarcity model, right? And so you can't raise the price on an unlimited supply.
Exactly. Yeah. It's amazing how it's the, I guess you could say this narrative, especially when it even comes to how us humans operate with each other, even on a collective level, on a business scale model or anything like that. So in one of your episodes, I heard you talking about a particular kind of infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
Do you mind touching base on that for a little bit? I thought it was a really interesting concept.
Yeah. So I have this notion that, as you were saying, that it's kind of a trick that they pull on us, right? It's not that there's unlimited supply on this earth, right? It's not that there's that, right? There definitely is a management aspect to the physical problem. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But as far as like, that's basically what I'm suggesting is an infrastructure that solves that problem, the physical problem, right? And the way we do it now is it's profit from waste. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's because every season a new product comes out, and there's a willy-nilly system to reclaim the old ones, right? But it's not guaranteed, and mostly computers. It's the biggest example. All of the rare earth metals, all of that stuff just gets shipped to the third world, and we have little kids in fields burning wires, to get the materials, right? So, I mean, the infrastructure, right, would be designed with a foundation in place that it is minimize, right, waste, maximize quality.
I love that, actually.
And so understanding that we exchange in order to live, human beings, right, is that we're buffered from nature, right, because we live in society, in this substrate of society, right? And so we exchange in order to live, and we forget that. I think we forget that. And we take all of this stuff that we can get at the store for granted,
Mm-hmm.
And we also forget, Hancock says we're a species with amnesia, but we also forget that we're creators. Every single one of us is built to create, and all we are doing for the most part is consuming, right?
I would agree.
And so it's really this, the focus group and the market research and the feedback from the customers that changes products. But first of all, they output a shitty product, right? That everyone is like going to easily point out what's wrong with it. It's like, make that product good first, right? Right. Don't be trying to cut costs on quality, right? And create a crappy product that all you have to do is sell a third of the inventory to make a massive profit. And then you got the rest of that shit at Big Lots, for like 5 years,
It's true though. It's true. And one thing, now that you're on that topic, I want to pick your brain about, because you talk about, less waste is what will actually maximize a better infrastructure, and I would wholeheartily agree with that. And the one thing, even a better product. In one of my episodes, I talked about how basic human psychology can prove a lot of conspiracy is true, at least a lot of them. And I got into, you made up a good case in point example. They make a shitty product where they have to, look at the principles that a lot of human beings have implemented. We have the light bulb cartels. They made light bulbs that were going to last a very, very long time, longer, even as long as some of the newer LEDs. And then they were like, well, no, we can't make them that good. We have to make them shittier, or else, we won't sell more light bulbs. And, the same thing. I believe there was a tire company back in the 30s and 40s who was doing the same thing. They had tires that would never go flat. And then they realized, like, oh, wait, we're never going to sell any more tires if they never go flat. So, in I guess some aspects of, sustainability, I can understand it to a degree, but I think it's taken a whole new form now. And it's moved into more of a form of greed, corruptive state, as opposed to just trying to have return revenue. So real quick, even looking at this, how do you feel about maybe a model of the exchange being for the greater good, as opposed of humanity, as contributing to the community, or, contributing to humanity, as opposed to the current exchange that we have going on right now?
Well, it all contributes, right? But there's this massive curtailing, or, you can say the word governor, right? Mm-hmm. Right? Just like when you rent a Ryder truck to move across country, you can't fucking floor that gas pedal. Right, it's got a governor on it.
Definitely. That's good. It's good. I like that.
So it's like it's curtailing our potential. Basically the way we do it now, because we exchange. This is our nature, right? This is what I would argue is our primary nature is to exchange, because we all have these gifts. Everything you're good at ends up being of value to others. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah. Anyway, so the exchange that we have is corrupted, right? But it is in our nature to relate with each other and exchange energy and information. So I mentioned 9,000 years. You're talking 8,000 years previous to that, right? We know on those of us who know, right? And it's not a belief, right? There's tons of evidence that there was an advanced civilization that existed during the last ice age.
Oh, of course.
Right. And so we had it together before, something about us. We knew, we had a better understanding, of what we are and what reality is, and so that exchange was built in those times, this sacred exchange, which is how we live, and it's like a body. Humanity is a body, and we're all the cells of the body.
I really like that. I like that description. That's a good way to put it.
And so in order to, make it through this transition, of where we're at right now, which is obviously, to me, it's a transition, but we can see, if we look in the past, we have people in every generation saying, holy fuck, the world's going to end.
I know, right?
Yeah. And Alan Watts, I'm thinking of specifically 1971, 69, and, Bucky Fuller, his whole mission, he's starting in 1914, these guys, Marshall McLuhan, right, could see the writing on the wall. These are the guys that I study. Like, this is what. Oh, you're going to say my burning bush moment is really when I was in the art center. I was teamed up. We did multiple disciplines. So we had advertisers, we had illustrators, and we had product designers all come together as a team. And the advertisers brought over this book by Marshall McLuhan called "The Medium is the Message." And I was like, holy fuck, when I read that book. And it was graphic with minimal words. And so he was telling the story graphically. He teamed up with a graphic designer, and it was so poignant. And yeah, I was like, oh my God, someone's finally speaking my language, And so it was really a turning point right then, actually. Yeah.
I really love that, and one thing that I really I really enjoy is listening to everybody's subjective burning bush moment. They'll kind of one. I'm a little bit like you. I've kind of been this way most of my life. I just didn't know what to call it until I was like 20 years old. And since you spoke about one of my favorite topics, ancient civilizations, I've done a couple of videos on them before, and it's a never-ending fountain of remembrance and rediscovery to me. And I think that a lot of that is embedded within us still. It just needs to be reactivated. And you did bring up in the similar clip that I was watching about how we all are creators and we have access to creation. And I think what has happened is you've had organized religions and you've had sensationalists and a lot of things happen throughout the years that have made people, I guess you could say, seem unworthy of the divine or make themselves feel like they're unworthy of the divine, that you have to go through a median or a medium of some kind in order to receive divine information. I mean, what do you think about that? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting because what it is that we're doing, like as that question, know thyself, on the top of the oracle at Delphi, right? It's a trick question.
Yes, it is. It is 100%. I agree with you on that. That's part of that symbolism.
Yeah, and so the thing is about that really is that when you really find out who you are, you realize that that your identity, that everything that you thought you were, previous to an awakening of this nature, is not you.
Exactly.
Is not you. And in fact, you're everything, right? And so we hear all of the sages, all of the avatars throughout history saying this same shit, Buddhism, Taoism, Zen Buddhism, all saying the same thing, which is that we insist on dividing ourselves. We insist on dividing ourselves out from the whole, right? And you can't, because you cannot, it's a polar relationship. They come into being mutually, right? So the whole and the individual are a polar relationship. And so they define each other. Exactly. And so when someone's looking for identity, it's basically what defines you is how you relate to the rest of the group. There's no identity in a vacuum,
Absolutely not. Absolutely.
Right?
No, not at all.
And so to have this feeling of unworthiness, is a division, right? It is a hard division right up front that you're not part of everything, and so divine inspiration comes through you and everyone because everyone is the whole, And so we have heard this, and it's like I've heard it. I used to listen to Alan Watts like 18 years ago, and I was like, yeah, fuck yeah, and I listened to him again, and I'm just like, oh, I hear it so much better now. I understand so much more, and he's describing a paradox, right? And this is what we can't fucking handle, is to exist in a superposition, right? In two states at once, individual, group, whatever you want to call it. And so everyone is the whole, right? This is the nature of what the structure is, right? It's holofractal, right? It exhibits all of the qualities of a fractal structure, right? Self-repeating pattern, in which no matter how you divide it, it's still the whole.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? The whole hologram. You clip a hologram, and it's the whole hologram, two of them.
Yeah. So self-similar at all scales, and like I'm a huge. That is very, very much in my train of thought. That we do live in a fractal universe, almost like a holographic universe, and everything is self-similar from the largest scale to the smallest, like that. And so I agree with you. It is a division tactic, and I think really a couple of things come into play, and I'll pick your brain about it here. Is that I feel in some ways that it could be this as well, that the powers that be, ultimately understood at that time, because the machine is not going to run the way they want it to if we have a whole bunch of enlightened humans walking around. You know what I mean? And it's I think maybe at a time it was possible that they decided to create organized religions and create a hierarchical concept to spiritual philosophy, which would essentially disseminate the common person from being able to understand that they are the divine embodied, they are the whole and a piece, all in one.
Yeah.
And, you know, therefore kind of in some ways strip us of that knowledge or that remembrance. And I also feel it is what you said too, is that, you know, even with the conditioning, you know, the conditioning that's placed upon us, it makes you feel like you're extra unspecial, right? And I mean, I'm not saying that anybody's more special than anybody else. You know what I'm saying? But like, you know, they go, oh, you live on this tiny little blue rock floating through this abyss. Your life is just by chance and meaningless, and all of that. And you know, I think really what it does is that the current human society has a lot of what I would call subconscious shame due to the conditioning that has been placed upon us. And for them to think that they are a subjective focal point of God or the universal consciousness, that they are it themselves, it kind of destroys and goes beyond human rational thought. So, I mean, what is a way you think that we can start getting back to this remembrance, and a way we can possibly talk about this and share this with others while getting them on board, you know, as opposed to turning them away?
Yeah. And I heard you talking about your meditation journey, and that's it. That's it right there. You know,
awesome.
That's how, right? That's it right there. And because when you're meditating, what happens? Your psychological sense of self dissolves.
Yeah, most certainly.
Right?
Most certainly.
And that is a non-dual position, right?
Of course.
Because when you identify with self, that is a dual position, because you're separating yourself from the whole. Two things, right? Mm-hmm. But it's impossible to separate from the whole.
You can't, no, you can't.
You can't.
And I think that that's a really, firm fundamental basis of a lot of spiritual principles and spiritual philosophies, that, you know, you are, you know, part of the macrocosm. You're a piece of this universal spirit, this consciousness. You are essentially it. And you know, speaking of meditation, you know, I actually, because, you know, I'm a fellow qigong practitioner. How long have you yourself been practicing?
Let's see. I came back in 2005 from Cali, so since then. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So do you feel that it's possible, you know, because I know I've listened to some of your other stuff and you brought this up a couple of other times. Do you feel that internal alchemy, like learning to cultivate, I guess, that divine nature of yourself, do you think that if this became a widespread practice, do you feel that maybe that this could or widespread knowledge, that this could maybe possibly help alter our path we take as humans in the future? What do you feel about that?
Yes, I think absolutely, because the pattern that we exhibit as a collective is an aggregate pattern of all of our behaviors, right? Mm-hmm. And so it creates a pattern through history, you know, and we know history is clouded and obscured and myopic, but we can definitely see that there's a repeating pattern, you know?
Oh, yes.
And so what meditation does, right, is, why is it that there's a repeating pattern? What is it that's common to all of us? You know, that no matter what culture, no matter where you are on the earth, for the most part, excluding some really aboriginal, isolated tribes or whatever, there's this same belief that is initiated, an assumption maybe, initiated at the point of interaction with another, you know, with other, right? And there's I think, right, you could call this the initial conditions, right, of the pattern of civilization, right? And so each of us has the origin inside of us, because it's all in our mind, right? It's all in our mind. So whatever people believe in the majority becomes operationally true inside society, right? Despite the fact that it may not be true, or there's some fault. It's not the whole picture, basically. Maybe not false, but not the whole picture, right?
I would agree.
And so it's like this, what Qigong does, right? It's a physical meditation, right? So setting out to meditate is you will hamstring yourself. You will not be able to meditate. It has to occur spontaneously. It's a causal intent. You do not cause it to happen. You have the intent for it to, but you do not cause it to, right? And so that will defeats you, right? Because that's a division from the whole. The will, right, is an identification of self. I must meditate. You know what I mean? I must do this and then this will happen. But what meditation is a mutual arising, right? It happens without fucking trying. And that's the only way that it can happen, And so what Qigong does is it gets you inside your body, And so standing is the main thing for Qigong. There's all this Tai Chi stuff that people want to see, flowing movements and beautiful shit, but standing in the horse stance is Qigong. That is the foundation of Qigong, right? And so if you do that, you get into a relationship with your body, and you can make your body into a bridge to the divine. Right.
100%, right. Man. I love it. Dude, and the way that you just described meditation, in fact, I absolutely love it because I think that is a prime part that is left out of a lot of mainstream spiritual circles. A lot of times they just tell you to quiet your mind or quiet the mind.
Stop thinking.
Yeah, it's non-thinking. I've had to come and be like, no. I said, look, you have to watch your thoughts pass without attachment. Yeah. Is what is basically what was. It's not that, of course, you're going to have thoughts. You just have no attachment with them. And then, the way that you just put it, though, it being a spontaneous arising, I mean, essentially, you're absolutely correct. It almost is like you do not cause the meditation. It is, you have that intent to sit down and enter that state, but it is almost a spontaneous arising.
Yeah. And so that is like the whole crux of everything is in that, right, in itself, is that one cannot set out as an individual to meditate, because the objective of meditation, if there is one, is to recognize that where your skin ends, you do not.
Yes.
Right? I mean, that's the only way really to put it, I mean, there's other ways you could say it. Yeah. And when you're doing the Qigong, there's something about the body knows. Right. And so you let go. Right. This is the paradox, is like, we're not our bodies. Right. We are the spirit that resides, or that is that animates the body. Right.
I agree.
But the body fucking is a teacher.
Oh, yes.
And so when you're standing and you're trying to keep your spine aligned and your hips and everything together, and you're doing all of that stuff, because it's actually really complex when it comes down to it. It's so simple, but when all of the things come together, you can find your mind just like addressing all of these things. Mm-hmm. You'll find that when you let go, stop trying to fucking do it, it happens.
It is.
And you'll be struggling. It's like this battle in your fucking mind. And this is the struggle that one must overcome, is to be non-dual, is to stop fighting with yourself.
I agree. Yeah, I've experienced that myself. It's a very simple practice. But the body does know. It is a teacher. It knows when there's a lot of, I guess you would say, external stimuli that takes place, I'm sure you feel this way too, that everything is consciousness. Even though you're not your body in an aspect of itself is conscious and receptive to what starts to happen. And I tell you, man, there's been times where, like, exactly how you said, I'll come home, I might not be all right, I've had a rough day, and I'm trying to do Qigong, and it never turns out the way that it needs to, as opposed to if I just flow into it and allow it to spontaneously arise. So I think you actually really gave some good advice, because I know there's a lot of people out there who kind of still struggle with certain meditative practices and getting down to meditate today. So one thing I definitely want to pick your brain about is, have you ever theorized yourself? All right. Now, I've had my own subjective experiences that have led me to my own conclusions, and I'm just kind of curious about yours. What that lost nature is about the human being. What exactly are we trying to remember and rediscover about ourselves? And I feel personally, at least in my train of thought, that I don't think that I think essentially we come from higher realms, the human being, or, we came from other places. But I'm just curious at like what your experience has summed up for you on that.
Well, it's so funny, the journey, because this Krishnamurti says it's there's nothing to be done. It's a flip of the switch. You don't have to go on this lifelong journey to fucking wake up.
I agree. It is. It's almost like it's almost like you're seeing reality how in the way reality actually is, as opposed to the way you've been conditioned to.
Yeah, and the whole thing is to see without any lenses, right? Mm-hmm. And thoughts are your lenses. Your conditioning, your experience, all of that shit is your lens for how you see the world. And so that will create a distorted perception,
I would agree.
Of what is, and so we tend to be hyper fixated on the model we have built of what we think reality is, right? Mm-hmm. It's a map, right? But the map is not the territory.
I like that. That's a good way to put it. It really is.
Yeah, and the word is not the thing. And so when we see something beautiful, it's like the word will come up in our mind, of whatever it is, And to really see it, you have to see it without any cataloging, categorization, or measurement,
Totally understand.
To see it without hanging on to your psychological sense of self, basically.
I would agree.
Yeah.
That's a very good way to put it. And, I definitely kind of touch a base on what we talked about in the beginning. It's the labels. It's that identifying with self that ultimately draws the ultimate separation from the divine. And I think really I think David Icke actually put it really well. He's like, you're born, they tell you that this is your name, this is your gender, this is your race, this is your class, this is all this. Mm-hmm. And then, you have people in this society and in this world today who grow up living by these labels. And I know that one objective that we try to do when we're doing our inner work and we're trying to help ourselves expand in consciousness and reach new levels of awareness is to rid ourselves of these attachments and rid ourselves of these labels. What are some good tips that you could give people to find ways to let go of these? Because I know there's a lot of people who still subconsciously struggle with these to a degree.
Well, the first one is like to have a quantum viewpoint, which is to allow things to remain in superposition instead of making a measurement and collapsing the wave function.
I'm with you.
You know what I mean?
So it's like an uncertainty principle. I like that.
Yeah, you permit the uncertainty. You permit the superposition without trying to lock it down. And so this is a quantum kind of way of seeing things. And I don't know if you've heard about this sovereignty movement, but they talk about quantum language when you're in court,
Mm-hmm.
And I just found out about it, and I don't know shit, right? But to me, I was like, oh, quantum language. That means that you're basically saying shit without saying it.
It's higher dimensional double speak, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's what we'll call it, higher dimensional double speak. But
mm-hmm.
but that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
But again, it's like getting back to the qigong. When you're breathing in qigong, it's a yogic breath. You can relate it to yoga. It's like Chinese yoga, basically. But it's a yogic breath, and so in qigong, you don't settle on the out breath, meaning you don't let your body settle. Right. This is the secret: is you actually extend. You got a causal intent to extend your spine upward on the out breath. right? You breathe out silently. So it's a silent out breath. You're breathing out so slow that it's not making any noise, you know? And you can access that silence from that position. Oh, yeah. And when you hear the sound of nothing, you are connected. And it's like, it's almost Kundalini. Like, to me, that's what it is that you make this connection to source, you know? And you are source is the thing. That's what basically it's doing, you know?
And I got a taste of that yesterday, not from Qigong, but it's definitely, yes, it's definitely a hard concept for a lot of people to grasp.
One sec.
Yeah, go right ahead, man.
Keep talking.
Yeah, it's a hard concept for a lot of people to grasp, that they are God. They are a subjective focal point of God. And it's something that is a huge part of my philosophy, and it's not even, you know, coming from, I guess you could say, a lot of, I guess you could say, conservative Christians refer to this statement as, what I'm saying, as a satanic thing or a thing against God. But meanwhile, we could see through multiple of the spiritualities, the philosophies, and the religions that this is indeed the case, that they have pointed to this, you know, this very thing multiple times. And do you feel that eventually, as humans spiritually progress, that there are going to be more and more people who come to find this out, and maybe at that point we'll have some kind of 100th monkey effect where more people might start to be a little bit more accepting of this notion?
Say what the notion is again. Sorry.
Oh, that we are God. That we are God.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So.
I mean, it's it's semantics, right? Mm-hmm. It's like that word is triggering for almost everyone. And that's everyone hanging on to their conditioning, you know. Mm-hmm. But I went on a podcast and they were like, "Are we living in a simulation?" And I was like, "It's not that relevant, but it's definitely virtual, but it's spiritual, you know, right?" And the programmer is the program, and we are the program and the programmer, you know. So we're not inserted into this game. We are the game. We are the game.
It's the I've called it an organic simulation.
And I love it's analog.
Yeah, it's an analog simulation. You're taking me back to the early 80s, and I'm starting to think we're all going to be an 8-bit kind of like, you know, like, holy crap, I have to walk over you. I can't walk around you because I'm too deep. But I'm with you too, man, and I agree. I think a lot of people get caught up in the semantics, and they get caught up in the what I would call the rigidity of a lot of, I guess you could say, even people on our side of the field have what I would call dogmatic thought. And, you know, a good case in point, like you said, do we live in a simulation? And you said, you know, it's not exactly, you know, relevant. You know, the same could kind of be said about the argument for, is the earth flat or round?
Yeah.
I've never.
What happens when you find out it's flat? What do you do then?
I know, right? I know, but it's like
we will go to Antarctica,
dude. I want to, no, I want to go. I want to go. I want to plan an expedition, and my goal is to get a parka and a tent that is completely white out, so I can somehow hide from the global military trying to make my way down. at least attempt. But you know, but like I was saying, I've never did that. You're right. The semantics shouldn't exactly take hold, and I'm a big believer that the simplicity is really where to find the good stuff when we're talking about this. And like I said, I've never seen a topic such as if the earth is flat or round drive a wedge between people on our side of the field.
Yeah.
Like literally, that's the one thing you can't talk about, or else everything goes up in arms. Yeah.
And that's, it's like, oh, dividing the truthers, you know, great. No, we're divided. And so we can't even like, I don't know, man. It's crazy. But as far as like what is our purpose, right? It's like, what is humanity's purpose? What is it? Like, is it humanity? Is this whole thing playing a game with itself? And that's basically it. It seems like, you know. And so when you're asking about like how you tips for being non-dual, you know, tips for being non-dual, understanding polarity.
That's a good
right?
That's a fundamental, I would say.
because things that are opposite are, you know, things, the dance of opposites that nature is, right, is that opposites can't exist without. You look for polarity. If you want to identify polarity in the environment, you look for things that cannot be defined without its opposite. You know, light and dark, up and down, you know, inside, outside, right? Object, subject, field, object, field, you know, ground, negative space, positive space, right? You can, all of those things, right, are unity in disguise. They're not different. They're the same. They're the same fucking thing, right? And so you recognize, right, in order to be non-dual, you have to be in a monopolar position, right?
That's a really good way to put it. I have to.
And so a lot of people say that love is the background, right? The void, the substrate of the universe, right? Because it's non-dual. There's no opposite to love.
There's no opposite. No love.
Does that make sense? Because a lot of people say love, hate, but you don't need hate to define what love is.
No, you don't.
Yeah. No.
It does make sense. It makes sense. And it's like, so one thing that I've noticed, so kind of how I go about it is that I go through what I call higher frequency, lower frequency counterparts. I mean, essentially, to me, love is not just an emotion. It's a power. It's a force. That it is creation. Creation stems from that force.
Yes.
And you know, of course, you know, because what we have is technically a neutral frequency that's just in service to creation. When we drop down to, I guess you would say this, I call higher frequency, lower frequency counterparts, and I think where a lot of people get that from is that essentially fear, which is a lower frequency counterpart of love. And that's why fear is a powerful manifester, just as much as love is. Love can manifest very powerfully, but fear can do it too, and in some weird and ugly ways. And I think that's and essentially I agree with you. Everything is love. Everything stems from love.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of people get that notion is they're like, you know, well, like, you know, fear this. So I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, again, you can't. That's not a polar relationship. If that's what you're suggesting, fear and love.
Well, so no. I know. This is just where I'll talk about. A lot of people have this mindset. This is where they get that mindset.
Yeah. Well, fear is a divider, right? Because fear is about like I must survive. That's what it comes down to at the lowest level, right? And so it's like us against them. It's me or you, you know. And so fear is a divider. Right. And so divided consciousness is the pattern that we have. Right. It's a fear pattern. Right. I often say, how to get at this, you know, that won't freak fucking people out. Right. So polarity, right? The universe is a dance of polarities. It operates, right? It is like it gets out of balance and then it rebalances itself continually over time. You know what I mean? And it's a dance of polarities, and these are natural polarities, right? That allow the universe to unfold in, right, the portion of the totality that where time actually is observable, right? Right, which is this 3-4 dimension, right, of the totality, because it's multiple dimensions, right? And so it's like in this physical portion of reality. Fuck, I lost my train of thought. What did you start on?
It's okay. So we were dissecting. You know, why fear is division mentality.
Yeah. So like this is where the fun portion of the totality is, right? Because it counts, right? You can actually take steps, move a distance, right? Where time actually is a thing, right? You can actually feel this, right? It's corporeal. And fear as a divider, right? It's divided consciousness because there's fear of the other, right? And so if you have fear of the other, then that's an immediate declaration that you're separate, right? And so this ejection, right, big jump here, ejection from the Garden of Eden, right, is out of a natural polar rhythm, right, and then rhythm of nature, and into an artificial rhythm, right, which is the rhythm of good and evil, right? The eating from the tree, eating from the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It's not the tree of knowledge. There are two trees in the fucking myth or the fable or whatever you want to call it. Two trees, tree of knowledge and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That's the fruit that she ate from, right? And it's knowledge that good is defined by evil. And so they are one. They're the same thing.
One
and this is
with the other, yeah.
Yeah, it's an artificial rhythm. It exists in our minds. We made it up. And that's why it exists, right? We do create reality,
Exactly.
right? And so now we're operating on this rhythm, right? This rhythm of good and evil, which is a dividing fucking rhythm, and it perpetuates the division. But when we operate on this pattern, it repeats a pattern. It repeats it's a cyclic pattern. We keep waking up on Groundhog Day in the morning and not remembering what the fuck, and so what is it that Murray learns in that movie? Is this stop being a selfish bastard?
That's
stop operating from a divided position, and then you break the cycle. You break the cycle, and now a new pattern emerges. A pattern that the relationship, the aggregate pattern that people do when they interact with each other is from a monopolar position, a position that is not divided, which recognizes that we are all part of the whole. So, right? And so general semantics is this trick. That's the guy, this Polish, I forget his name, Polish philosopher who came up with general semantics, and he coined the phrase, the map is not the territory. He's like, this is the trick. All you got to do is never make a declaration. Say, it appears that way at the moment. Don't say is. You just don't say is. You never say that's how it is.
That's a good
and then that's that Zen parable too. The farmer with the son, right? Wild horses come running out from the forest and they capture them, and the neighbors are all, oh, sweet, that's awesome. You got fucking horses. And the old guy's like, perhaps. Right? Next day they're breaking the horses and his son fucking breaks his leg. The neighbors come over and they're like, man, that's bad luck, bro. Old dude's like, perhaps. Next day, the press gang from the emperor's army comes to draft every able-bodied male in the village. He's got a broken leg. Fucking can't get drafted.
Sounds like a series of unfortunate events.
But it's like you don't declare what it is, right? Because everything is in flux, constantly in rhythm, And so I would suggest is that in order for us to make this thing, there's nothing we can do to address the pattern inside the pattern, because it just repeats the pattern, right? More divided consciousness. And so it creates, the individual has to make this psychological transformation that permits them to operate in a way with others that is non-polar, that is non-divided, that recognizes that we are all the same thing. And I think that if we can do that, we can allow everyone to access, this is the infrastructure idea, we create a mandala style, we use technology, right? We don't abandon technology. This is our nature. We exchange the items that we make in order to live. So to suggest that technology is a trap, well, so are words. Words are also a trap, right? But we the only way out of the forest is through, You know what I mean?
I agree. And you brought up, this will be our kind of our last topic before we close out, but you brought up something very interesting, man. And this is something that I talk about a lot and I'm a huge believer in. You use the term never say it is, or to use the word is. Now, I study a lot of etymology. Okay, and I look at the basis of words and the basis of different phrases, and how what you just basically said is that everything's in flux, which I agree, and by literally saying something is, you're manifesting that into creation. Do you feel that yeah.
I would, yeah. I mean, you're manifesting one side of the pole, in
one side of the pole,
and also the other side.
Yes, at the same time. Well, do you feel that that this was a particular frame that either this framework of reality, this spelling or this use of words, do you feel that this could have been a concept here all the time, or was this possibly implemented later on that almost as a way of keeping ourselves divided and trapped? In an essence, is that we don't understand this basis or this framework that kind of has to do with existing and having a way of being in this reality. How do you feel about that?
Well, so what is it that you say that caused us to be trapped? Like what?
So so basically, one thing I say a lot is the spelling of this reality is the spell itself.
Yeah.
Right. And, we talk about how everything is frequency and vibration, and essentially your words and what you say and what you speak is a frequency and vibration. And we know that's how we create. We create through that and that intent. So I guess what my question was is do you feel that this is possibly hidden from us in an attempt to keep us astray from this information? Because ultimately, I feel like if this became common knowledge, it would kind of cause a huge paradigm shift. And what do you think about that?
Yeah, they're holding us back from all kinds of shit and training us from a very young age to see the world in a certain way. And so we won't even consider it at a certain age, unless something profound happens, and that can happen in multiple different ways, right? Learning the hard way is something that I'm not that interested in, especially for, the collective, Exactly. I don't think it's necessary, right?
I don't think it's necessary either.
So I think we can do it. But as far as like the use of words, yeah, it's, and that the creation story, right, has truth to it, in the beginning, right?
There was the word.
Yeah, there was the word, and it's like frequency. It's frequency. Everything is frequency. Light is just like, really high vibration noise,
Most certainly. And there's a lot of people who, feel the light is a consciousness and a source of information itself, and I think the information for our remembrance and our rediscovery is just located within us. It exists within us. And I think really what we're looking for are people like you, Mr. Birch, who have a different perspective, who can actually, break things down in a way that people can understand. And that's one thing that I've noticed about you, and I respect that a lot, man. Like, it takes a lot of know-how, and it takes a lot of trial and error to find a way to describe things in a way that a lot of people can understand, man. So you always have my props for that. That is awesome. Thanks, sir. Of course. So real quick before we head out, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you and where they can listen to your show?
Yeah, it's the podcast is greennight.green, and it's you can listen to it through Podbean there, or it's on Spotify or all Apple or whatever. And it's Green Knight, GREEN KNIGHT. And if you search that on any of the platforms, you'll be able to find it. And and also I have a YouTube channel, just Birch Driver, @BirchDriver. And so I teach people Qigong on that YouTube channel.
Very cool.
And so I have a free instructional video on how to do the standing, and it's at the bottom of my video list. And so I recommend everyone fucking go and try to do it. And then all of my lives on the channel are all there still. But I go live like every week or so, and I will stand first. Right? We'll stand together. We'll stand together, man. Stand together.
And I love that, man. And I'm honestly, I'm going to check out your Qigong videos, because I'm always looking for different perspectives and different practices, or even different cues that, that kind of lend to my practice as well. And I think that's cool. We share that, man, because not a lot of people are privy to it, but I think it really makes a difference, and it's really beneficial. So
yeah, and I appreciate that compliment, man, about making sense, because what we're discussing here is really the undiscussable. You know?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Right? Because you end up with a contradiction, right? And so you have to accept that. You have to accept it, right? And that's kind of how you operate in a non-dual way. But I have some other points. Maybe we could talk again sometime, man. But,
no, I'm always up for round two, man. And we're definitely on a similar wavelength. You and I think very similarly, and it's really nice to meet another person who's positively optimistic, who does not think that the world's going to end tomorrow. But other than that, Birch, thank you so much for joining us tonight, man. Let's talk after the show. After I get done, I'll swing you a message and let's talk about a round two. I'd actually like to maybe do like a good long conversation with us and see what we're getting into.
We could choose a subject, I told you I began with okay, there's a solution, right?
Yeah.
But there's only one problem.
There's only one problem.
All of the problems are a symptom of that one root issue. We address that and we're good.
I would agree, man. I agree. Well, you have yourself a good night, man. Thank you again for joining us. And I'll get up with you on Messenger as soon as I'm done here. Okay, man?